The X Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Rob McConnell's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the X Zone Radio Show or endorsed in any manner by Rob McConnell, Relmar McConnell Media Company, the X Zone Broadcast Network, its affiliated networks, stations, employees, or advertisers.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Welcome back, everyone. This is the final hour of tonight's X Zone, coming to you from our broadcast center in beautiful Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, on the X Zone Broadcast Network and on our growing family of broadcast affiliates around the world, not to mention TalkStreamLive.com. If you'd like to send an email, xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. If you'd like to send me an email directly to the studio, it's studio@xzoneradiotv.com. On all social media sites, X Zone Radio TV, and our radio website at www.xzoneradio.com. Hey, X Zone, by the way, don't forget the new X Zone groups page on Facebook, www.facebook.com/groups/ X Zone Radio TV. That's facebook.com/groups/X Zone Radio TV. My guest this hour is Michael Svehla, and he's been studying astrology since 2006. He is an autodidactic. Is that how you say that, Mike? Autodidactic, and therefore self-taught in Western astrology. He quickly developed an interest in the 8 hypothetical Neptunians. Wow. And uses them frequently in his readings, granting greater insight into themselves and to their inquiries. Among Mike's talents is the ability to see the big picture of the chart and suggest what talents and purposes someone has in life. Mike has done well over 1,000 micro readings or mini readings and many in-depth readings, as well as crafting a weekly horoscope and other various works that anyone with an interest in astrology might find useful. His website is triplewaterastrology.com. And Mike, welcome back. How are you doing, old friend?
Very well. Thanks for having me on your show again.
Hey, listen, let's talk about politics because, you know, it's so boring. There's nothing really happening in the political arena. Right. Come on, give me a break. Man, I've never, you know, they're like kids. You know, my grandchildren who are 2 and 3, the youngest ones we have, you know, they act more responsible and more respectful than either Clinton or Trump does.
I would agree. There's a lot at stake, so I think the 2 candidates, the 2 nominees, are really digging deep, and it's very interesting you bring that up because I was going to talk about each candidate's moon, and I think their instinctive reactions are very characteristic of what you're seeing.
Well, why don't we start, and who would you like to start with?
How about Donald Trump?
All right, the Trump, who is being targeted more than any other candidate when it comes to negativity by the people at CNN and other media outlets. And I find it rather funny that you know, it seems that it's lopsided. They look at the little anthills of the negativity and they forget the mountains of positive things that are going on, not only for Donald, but for Hillary as well.
Certainly, I think I was impressed with Trump visiting Louisiana recently, and he certainly seems to make himself public and available to a lot of people who want to see him in person. He's a celebrity.
Yeah.
so that's what makes his run rather interesting. I mentioned the last time we spoke, I thought my best guess was that Trump would go third party, and it turns out that he's the Republican nominee. So his chart, that actually is very congruent with his charts, I think. He has a lot of strong placements and things going on natally, as well as in the current transits, what we see in the heavens at this moment. Anyway, for those who dig astrology, you may be interested to know that his sun is opposite his moon, and the way his sun and moon are placed, it's very indicative of someone who is adept at networking and someone who is very oriented towards accomplishment and achievement. So he's very driven, both unconsciously and consciously, to do great things, I think, and that's resulted in him owning a lot of real estate and not only having a lot of money but a lot of fame along with his fortune. Now, what's also quite interesting about Trump, he's rather inclined to luxury, and his Jupiter is abundance and expansion. His Jupiter is in Libra in his second house, and that's very Venusian. So he's inclined to luxury, and that's also a very good placement for his Jupiter. And then, very briefly, I'll try to be succinct here with each candidate's chart. What's fascinating about Trump's chart also is that he has Mercury and then two other planets, Saturn and Venus, in the Cancer sign, and that's very indicative of his choice of career, which is real estate. So he's not he's very adept at dealing with people, but I think it's better. He's better on a business level than a personal level. And I know he has many contacts and friends, but also note that he's been divorced at least a couple times. What's going to propel him to the victory, I think, is being able to kind of establish that business kind of partnership or image with the American people. So that's also very kind of a Cancer trait,
right?
And that those planets in Cancer help him relate to Americans, I think. So he's quite a strong candidate. And then lastly, for Trump, he has his Mars pushing on his ascendant angle. And in astrology, the ascendant angle is very important. And then a planet close to it is also very revealing in the personality. If anyone who observed Trump for more than a few minutes notices he's very driven and kind of brash and pushy, and he likes to get what he wants, and that's very Mars oriented, and it's pushing on one of his angles, and I think he uses that energy effectively. So altogether, I mean, there's more things I could point out, I suppose, but that's the gist of his chart, and he has some powerful combinations in his chart.
And this is just a news headline that's come into our news desk, the news desk at the Canadian News Network, who their news director on duty just sent over to me because he was listening to the show and he thought that we'd get a kick out of this. Trump slams Clinton for third world-style corruption. Donald Trump stepped up his attacks on Hillary Clinton, accusing her of third world-style corruption over her family's charitable foundation and calling her unfit to hold office. And this is a quote, it is a total embarrassment if our Secretary of State can be bought or bribed or sold, he told a rally in Austin, Texas, after a damaging Associated Press report raised questions about whether donors to the Clinton Foundation paid cash for access to America's top diplomat. You know, I think why Trump is doing so well despite all the negativity that's being, shot at him. Oh, by the way, if you haven't guessed it, I'm a Trump supporter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Hell, I'm in Canada. I can support anybody I want. It's just that I've got so many good friends in the United States and listeners that I'm always asked by them, what do I think? And, I think that your chart is dead on when it comes to Donald Trump. And I think that Donald Trump wants to do what your Constitution wanted or your Declaration of Independence went for, and that's we the people. He wants to take I the people out and put we the people back in. And all right, I'm off my political soapbox opera. There you go, Craig. All right, my producer gave me a slap on the wrist for getting into a diatribe about Trump.
Alrighty.
But you know what? One thing I will say is that for so long, politicians have run the country. And I think that the country is now in the situation where it needs a businessman to run it, because no matter what the country is, it is a business. You're in the business of making money for your country and getting people employed so that they can earn a living. That's just my 2
One
cents.
of Trump's best arguments, I think, is that he's not beholden to the special interests.
Yep.
And that appeals to a lot of people at this point in time. The economy is not growing like it was in the 90s, and there's some discontent with many of the policies that the establishment has forced us to live with. So there's the question of representation, and Trump is pushing all the right buttons, it seems, in that regard.
Yeah. Here's just one more that the news director sent over. Missing FBI files linking Hillary Clinton to the suicide of White House counsel Vince Foster have vanished from the National Archives. Oh, geez. It just keeps on getting better.
I heard something, or I read something in the news about that.
Yeah.
Something in the National Archives disappeared, so it was related to the Foster case.
Yeah.
Now, Hillary was so far as I know, she was very hard on Vince Foster, and there's rumors that contributed to his unfortunate suicide.
Mm-hmm.
But Hillary definitely needs to be more forthright, and I can definitely provide some insight about her personality via her chart.
So what can you tell us about Hillary?
Hillary has a much different chart than Trump.
Mm-hmm.
She has a very watery type of chart. She's a Scorpio sun, and she also has her ascendant angle in Scorpio. So the way she appears, her outer personality is very in tune with her core self, her sun, and that can be used very productively or not. Of course, anything in astrology is like that. So therefore, she's rather secretive. And behind the scenes, she doesn't seem to be very accessible, except to maybe her inner circle and Huma Abedin and so on. She, in the less productive uses of the Scorpio energy, there can be vengefulness, backstabbing or very negative type of things, and then of course cover-ups. And it seems like every day there's something about the emails or there's health problems or something, and Hillary keeps insisting that everything is okay, but I don't think a lot of people continue to buy that as the hearings and the FBI investigation and everything keeps adding up for not in her favor. The moon I mentioned, she has moon in Pisces. Now I also have that lunar placement. And she was puzzling me a bit. I couldn't get a good grip on how her Pisces moon was operating. But I believe, unfortunately, in Hillary's case, it's kind of the moon is very instinctive, and I think she instinctively fabricates or imagines things, and that can lead obviously to people not trusting her, as well as the more conscious cover-ups. Now, there's a lot of good aspects to Scorpio and Pisces moon. She's probably emotionally self-sufficient. There's a certain type of creativity inherent in those placements. But she is also kind of an enigma, but that's very true to her Scorpio self. Otherwise, in her chart, briefly, she has Venus and Mercury also in Scorpio, so she has some other heavy planets in the Scorpio sign. Of great interest, those planets in Scorpio, they square or they make a tense angle to Mars, Pluto, and Saturn in Leo. Now, Saturn is associated with the father in astrology, And the Venus, Mercury squaring Saturn and the other two planets in Leo, that indicates, or that's very symbolic of her difficulties with her father when she was growing up. So I think a lot of that has shaped her personality. She's very driven to succeed and get what she wants in life and do whatever it takes. But I think she's also made some bad choices on the way. And there's no need to get into that. Everyone's very familiar with the various scandals. And then lastly, one thing that's overlooked perhaps with Hillary is just like Trump has Mars on his ascendant, Hillary has Mercury on her ascendant. And so there's a lot of thought and communication that's a type of driver in her chart. But I would also suggest that she's very good at things like power networking and behind the scenes negotiating and some of those more useful aspects of Mercury and Scorpio. So altogether, her chart is very much about power, and it is quite impressive. After all, she's the first woman who's been nominated to one of the parties to run for president.
Looking at the big picture, are you able to, using astrology, project as of whenever you did it, or if you've done it, when the stars will be able to tell who the next president of the United States is going to be? And if so, who is it?
Yes. Now, what I did, and what is commonly accepted in astrology and what astrologers use, is the transit chart for the day of the election. In other words, I cast the chart for November 8th, and that's going to be the positions of the planets in the zodiac on the day when the election takes place in the U.S. So that mundane event, that monumental event, it's assumed that the heavens, the configuration of the planets in the heavens, will reflect what happens here on Earth. And I definitely was able to use the charts to determine who is more likely to win. And it sounds like you'll be happy to find out that it's Trump. And I certainly have what I looked at to back up my prediction. My astrological prediction is that Trump is going to win the presidency. Mm-hmm. And in a way, as an astrologer, I'm picking Trump. And it's interesting because I still have a little bit of trouble believing that Trump can win. It seems like Hillary is the safe choice. The establishment and Trump making all, the outrageous statements and people saying they're not going to vote for Trump and so on. And even his own party seems to be against him a lot of the time. But based on the charts, I think Trump is going to be the next president.
Wow. Now, something that bothers me about Donald Trump is that he is a lot, as far as I can see, a lot like John F. Kennedy was. He wants to go in and shake up the Washington good old boy club. Jack Kennedy wanted to abolish the CIA. Jack Kennedy wanted to get out of Vietnam. Jack Kennedy wanted to do things that the old boys in Washington were dead against. When I look at
Indeed, yes.
When I look at Donald Trump, I can see the same. And I'm just wondering if what happened to JFK for the reasons he was assassinated might also be in play for Donald Trump. And I wish no one ill or no one harm.
That angle I haven't considered. I hear what you're saying. I can see Trump shaking things up. I don't know that I've thought of Trump as kind of a JFK type. Mm-hmm. Good question. I don't. I haven't looked further in the transits. I'm. It's definitely. I think Trump has good security, and I would hope that continues if he becomes president. Now, I'm also a little bit skeptical as to. Trump is saying, Mexico is going to pay for a wall, and I don't believe that's going to happen.
Neither do I.
It seems like he's making a lot of bold statements, but I'm waiting. If he becomes president, I'm certainly waiting to see what he carries through so far as what he promised. So, but it's a good question. I think Kennedy. I've read a really good quote about Kennedy. He really believed he was the president. So if Trump is determined to upset the apple cart with the establishment, and we know that he doesn't like them, you raise an excellent point.
Another similarity that I just thought of as you were talking was Kennedy brought his family, Bobby Kennedy, into the fold, as well as Edward Kennedy into the fold. Trump is going to do the same, or planning to do the same with his children. So there's another ironic similarity.
Oh, sure. The dynasty that the Kennedys created may be what Trump envisions for his presidency and his family. Now, I would caution, I know of another astrologer, and she's very good. She raised an interesting point, and she questioned whether either Trump or Hillary would even be able to complete one term of office. And I don't think of that so much as an assassination, and obviously we don't want that to happen.
Of course not.
So much as I really question whether Trump really wants to be president. I know certainly anyone probably does, but he may not be so serious about it. And one example is I've noticed he spent some of his personal fortune, but much less than perhaps it might take to win.
Well,
I think that's something I've also thought of.
I think the reason for that is that he is a master of utilizing the media. Like, all he has to do is open his mouth and bang, the media's right there. And you know as well as I do, Mike, that advertising, whether it's good or bad, is advertising. There's no such thing as bad advertising.
Absolutely. He's definitely gotten... now, during the Republican primaries, he got something like, I don't remember the number, but someone threw around a number like $1 or $2 billion worth of free advertising.
Right.
Now, I was skeptical that once he got the nomination, or once we knew he got the nomination, I had the feeling that the press would turn right around and start going kind of negative on him. But I'm not sure I've really... I mean, there's certainly been ways the press has criticized Trump. Sure. But I'm not sure that they've covered him less. So he is doing a very good job of continuing that free press coverage.
Sure. How is does the astrology give you an idea how the health of either of the candidates is? For example, Donald is saying that Hillary's sick. Hillary is now fighting to get Donald Trump's medical records. Like, they're acting like two kids, but when it comes to push and shove, does astrology show any weakness in either of their health?
I believe so, and I believe I found that in Hillary's charts. The astrologers use something called the progress chart, and I found something most interesting in Hillary's progress chart. And I'm getting a little bit into jargon here, but for people who enjoy astrology, they'll definitely raise their eyebrows. I think the Hillary's progressed chart has 5 planets, including Moon conjunct Neptune. There's 5 planets conjunct, or rather aspecting Neptune, and Neptune symbolizes pharmaceuticals. So based on her charts, my suspicion is that she's relying heavily on pharmaceuticals at this time. And she also has her progressed Sun and Mercury in her progressed 12th house, and that's also associated with Neptune. And the Sun and Mercury are both in Capricorn, and that Saturn sign, or the material, or in other words, the body. And in the 12th, that also alludes to using pharmaceuticals to treat the body. And I'm not a medical astrologer by any means. I usually try to avoid that, but that is so prominent in her chart. I mean, I can see that even without being a medical astrologer.
What was the hardest part for you as an astrologer doing those two charts?
I actually, the hardest part of analysis in astrology for me is probably, and it's the most exciting too, it's that I don't know what I'm looking for when I start. And I was very convinced by Trump's charts because of several things I saw in addition to patterns repeating themselves. So, I mean, that's not a guarantee that he'll win. Sure. But that makes me, that really grabs my attention when things repeat. And then in Hillary's case, she does have some kind of odd things in her charts, and there's some repetition, but Saturn, the restrictor, is gumming things up in her charts. So that between her and Trump, it was very easy to pick Trump. I think Trump is going to win based on the astrology.
You and I have to take a short break, Mike. Please stand by. Great having you with us. Thank you very much for coming on the show tonight. Exonation, Mike Svehla is our special guest this hour. www.triplewaterastrology.com. That's www.triplewaterastrology.com. And we'll both be back on the other side of the short break as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away. And welcome back, everyone. My goodness. Kind of creepy music there, Craig. Before we get back to our guest tonight, Mike Svehla, just like to let you folks know about the new programming that we have here on the X Zone Broadcast Network. And you can find out all the programming and the broadcast schedule at www.xzbn.net. As you know, we have Corey doing high tech with Corey K. Gwilda Wiaka does the science of magic. Kevin Randall does a different perspective. I do the X Zone. Roberta Grimes starts in our fall schedule with Seek Reality. Patty Conklin is going to be coming on the network with Quantum Physics to Metaphysics. And then we also have Joe Wiegand, a police detective by day, paranormal investigator by night. He's going to have his own show starting in the fall lineup. And Dave Schock is going to be hosting his own show once a week called The Shock Factor. All that and much more here on the X Zone Broadcast Network. Mike Svehla, thank you so much for joining us. This is really interesting. What's it like for you when you do a chart and you see destiny unfolding in front of you?
Well, I have had the experience of making a prediction, and I was thinking, it's not happening, And I have literally said at one time, I'm either wrong or it's just late. And actually, that prediction helped me rectify my own natal chart. If you don't have an exact birth time, it throws off the timing of your prediction. So I have had that experience. And I would suggest to your audience that I'm a little bit off the beaten path, maybe as far as astrology goes, because I kind of take a little bit of a skeptical approach to it. I don't completely disbelieve it, but I also like to test it and make sure or see if it works. So I like to think of the way I look at the chart and approach astrology as kind of a happy medium between, I don't quite have complete faith in it, but I'm not completely skeptical of it either. And that said, I've seen many kind of uncanny and cool things in the charts, and every time I do a reading or predict a mundane event like this, I definitely learn something about astrology. There's always something more to learn about it.
What would happen if someone comes to you for a reading and they give you their name and what they believe to be their place of birth or their time of birth, and they're adopted, and they really don't know? How does this affect anything?
Well, you can look at the day a person was born, and that can provide some insight, even when you're making predictions. But the best data would be something, if you don't know your birth time, your chart would have to be rectified. In other words, an astrologer can deduce a person's birth time based on their life events if they don't know their exact time of birth. But it's a difficult process, or maybe better said, it's kind of time consuming. I have, like I said, I rectified my own chart, but it was only by a few minutes. Now, it's interesting that you bring that up because I have attempted a few rectifications of celebrities that I like, but I don't know their birth time. But with rectification, there's an art to it, and you're never completely sure. And that said, there's been some very good rectifications. Even the birth of Jesus of Nazareth has been rectified, which is pretty amazing.
So, how does that relate to the accuracy of a person's reading? Would it be the same as if you had their name, date of birth, place of birth, and so on?
It's very, very important to have an accurate birth time. I don't do rectifications for I could do rectifications, but I've never formally done a rectification for a client. But I do at times. I tell clients, I ask, is this your birth certificate time? Most often they say it is.
Right.
And then I do warn people in my readings that you may notice the effects that I predict. If they happen sooner than I predict or later than I predict, that can help rectify your chart. So it's very important to have the birth time, and we're talking even like 15 or 30 seconds can mean that your ascendant or another angle is in a different sign. So I'm also very cautious. Like with Trump's chart, I'm very convinced that he's a Leo ascendant, but his time of birth shows it at 29 degrees and 58 minutes of Leo. So even seconds later, after 10:54 a.m. on the day he was born, he would be a Virgo ascendant. So it's astrologers, so far as I know, have accepted the Leo ascendant, and I've found that to work, and I've found that that's very true to Trump. So I believe his chart is correct.
Who else have you done charts for that are high profile that you can share with us? Well,
you raised the JFK, and I've done some analysis on the JFK assassination.
And how did
astrologically?
And how did that work out?
That is it's a very tragic, unfortunate moment in time, a moment in history. That's a good example of a chart that I found to be very uncannily accurate. If you dig astrology and study that chart, there's all of the planets, or especially some of them like the sun, the moon. They're in a very, the very place you might expect them to be, and it's kind of eerie the way everything in the chart is set up. And it's, of course, the assassination of a president is tragic, but even the slow-moving planets, we witnessed Uranus and Pluto conjunct in Virgo during the 1960s, and that, of course, is in the JFK assassination chart. And even those two planets are very indicative of that kind of, that shocking transforming event that happened in the context of kind of the steady, industrious, and practical decade of the 1960s. And also notice both RFK and Martin Luther King were assassinated after JFK, and that those events also occurred in the 60s, and also when Uranus and Pluto were in Virgo together, conjunct. So the entire decade of the 60s, the protests, the riots, in the context of this very orderly, neat society on its surface, is very indicative of those planets. So when you start studying astrology, and a lot of people, I talk to on Facebook or in person when I give presentations, when you start delving into astrology and studying it, it's very uncanny how you find the archetypes acting themselves out in society and in your own life, and that's one good way to approach astrology. Like I mentioned earlier, as above, so below. So once you become fluent in the language of the archetypes and the planets, it's very useful for understanding, your natal promise, or especially predicting, and that can be very useful in career, for example, or other parts of your life.
Would you say that an astrological chart for a child would give the parents a better roadmap to the child's strengths and to his success or her success?
I think so. I have occasionally, read a youngster's chart, like a newborn or someone under, say, the age of 5 or even 10. I would caution that can give you a good insight into the potential of a youngster, but their life hasn't unfolded much to speak of, so they're still kind of developing that potential. And I would caution, it can be very interesting to read an infant's or a child's natal promise, but also it must be borne in mind that they have a choice about how to use it, and a lot of the choices haven't been made yet. Like I could say, well, this person, this newborn I'm seeing, I've actually thought this about someone. I think this newborn is going to be a surgeon, and it could be. They can be anything when they grow up. So it is fun to speculate about their potential. But part of astrology is also the fact that people also have their own choices about how to use the energies.
Sure.
And it's kind of a strange mix of fate and free will.
Can astrology be used for someone who is contemplating opening up a new business? Is there anything that astrology could do to be used in the success of their business?
That is actually one of the more practical and useful applications of astrology, and that would be considered an election in astrology. And I have done that. Of course, I've done that with my own I set an election for the moment I started writing my book, and for other things in my career and personal life. And I helped someone determine the best time to launch a website. So with astrology and an election, the key is finding the most favorable chart based on your objective, like starting a business, or you could also do an election for being married, or just about anything else you can think of, like going on a long vacation or something.
So astrology has many, many applications, and it's only limited by the availability of a person who has access either through their own gifts and their own talents and their own research into astrology, or by calling someone like you.
Absolutely, I would agree.
What has been the strangest request that anyone has ever asked of you as an astrologer?
I don't think I've gotten many unusual types of requests, and I'm trying to think. I'm not sure. I do recall someone at a conference saying that someone wanted their help in stealing something or doing some kind of criminal act, and of course he had to tell them, ethically I can't do that. I would also be quite worried about if someone was bold enough to do that for someone. I would think that person would be quite unhappy if they failed. So I would strongly recommend against something like that on all counts.
If someone wanted to become an astrologer, someone who's listening to us tonight, what guidance or what advice could you give them?
Certainly, it's before I became an astrologer, I went to school and I studied economics, and I've noticed that people tend to select themselves into their career. I would guess that you've actually, I think I read on your website that you've always loved entertainment and radio.
Yes.
So you're a natural good fit for being a talk show host and the medium of radio. And I think, as with anything else, it's not so important to go to school to be an astrologer or have some kind of certain requisite, other than that you're very passionate about it. Somehow approaching astrology, with your, you've always loved the stars and planets, or you love mythology, or you're very adept at analysis and looking at symbols, and the chart appeals to you. There's always something you can build on, and I think the most important part of that is if you really enjoy it and think you're really meant to do something like that. There's all kinds of books and websites, and even my own website has cool stuff about astrology that's suitable for people who think they might enjoy learning it.
We've got about 3 or 4 minutes left. What has been the most pivotal moment in your life as an astrologer?
The one thing I do remember is my first conference. It was the United Astrology Conference, and that was in 2008. And that happened to coincide with a major event in my progressed chart. And up to then, I wondered, what's all this about? And I was studying on my own and wondering how to, maybe if I could start my own business and so on. And I think that conference really solidified that for me. And I met all kinds of cool people at the conference, of course, and as I continued studying, I could use that as a basis for comparing how my knowledge progressed. So I would suggest if people want to learn astrology, I would say persistence is one of the keys. of course, I didn't always know how to approach the chart or do analysis, and it would be, I would be remiss not to say it's a lot of work, but it's really not about work. It's about, like I said, what you're passionate about, and if your talents and interests fit being an astrologer. And there's probably all kinds of ways that there's evolutionary astrology, esoteric, and symmetrical astrology, Vedic. So there's something. If you think you might like astrology, it's a pretty safe bet that you can find your niche too, because there's so many ways to approach it.
Something for everyone in astrology, right?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
I said there's something for everyone in astrology.
Oh, absolutely, I think so. If you have an interest and passion, I know that astrology is a very friendly field, and it's very approachable, and I like to make things very kind of plain English and plain spoken for people who have an interest in it. And I run into people like that all the time, for example, on Facebook. And so I like to, I also like to encourage people to hammer at the basics. I've been studying for about 10 years, but one thing I've always found is that I go back to the basics. Like I've asked when I was beginning, I asked astrologers, what does the sun really symbolize? I mean, we talk about sun signs all the time, but what do you think it means? And I over the years, I've realized that clients demand kind of a plain spoken explanation, and they want to know how the charts affect them. So I'm always finding that I get very basic, and the analysis can get very complicated, but I like to convey the the basic meaning of the planets and think about how those energies manifest, and that's part of being able to read the chart effectively.
What are your final thoughts? We've got about a minute. How does astrology see the world of tomorrow?
That's a good question. One thing I've been thinking about lately a lot is artificial intelligence and how that is rapidly advancing. So as we approach Uranus entering Uranus entering Taurus soon, that is probably going to further accelerate the material inventions and uses of artificial intelligence that can be applied to all kinds of things that only humans used to be able to do. So we're going to witness a very accelerated transformation of the world through technology, and I think astrology can certainly reflect that. We have Uranus entering Taurus, which is huge. And then we also have Pluto entering Aquarius not long after. So those two planets, in fact, I mentioned those planets were conjunct in Virgo in the 60s. Maybe the two planets entering Taurus and then Aquarius is symbolic of a whole new kind of cycle we'll experience. And I think a lot of that is going to stem from artificial intelligence.
Hey, Michael, you and I have to say so long for tonight. I do want to thank you so much for joining us. A great pleasure talking to you. And as we get closer to the November elections, why don't you come back on the show and let us know if there are any updates?
Okay, thank you. I look forward to it.
Michael, take care of yourself, and to you and yours, have a safe and enjoyable evening.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Exonation, Michael Svehla has been our guest, and that's it for tonight. I'll be back tomorrow night at 11 o'clock Eastern, as once again we cross the time-space continuum to this place that I call the X Zone. So until tomorrow night, Exonation, remember, always keep your eyes to the sky and your heart to the light. Good night now.